Chapter 9, Section 3 is solving quadratic equations. And so we're going to solve by graphing, and we're going to solve by using square roots. So what it means to solve, or just a reminder that a quadratic equation is something that's in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And a cannot be 0, obviously, for that, because then there would not be an x squared term. What solving for a quadratic equation basically means is finding out where that parabola intersects the x-axis. Okay? So the obvious or the easiest way is, if you can graph it, just look where it crosses the x-axis. Now that also entails you having to graph it, and so that's kind of an extra step sometimes you have to take. And so we're going to show you a couple of different ways. Okay? So like I said, the easiest way is, if you have it graphed, is the solutions are just this. Find out where the parabola crosses the x-axis. Okay? So for this one, it is at -2 and at +2. Okay? Our equation is x squared minus 4 equals 0. So what we're wondering is, what numbers could you plug in for x where this would be true? That's what we mean by solving it, or finding the solutions. You can't just plug any number in here. If you plugged in 5, 5 squared minus 4, 5 squared is 25, minus 4 is 21. 21 does not equal 0, so that's not a solution. A solution is something that makes this true. Okay, so again, graphing it is probably your easiest bet, but it's not always something that's possible either. Okay. Something to keep in mind: a quadratic equation can have 2, 1, or no real number solutions. Okay. Make sure you get that in your notes, and also make sure you get these alternative names. Sometimes they're called roots of the equation or zeros of the function. Those are basically, those are just different words for solutions to the equation. Okay? So what are the solutions of each equation? Use a graph and a related function. Okay? So if we graph these, the x squared, remember the -1 kicks it down 1. And if I graphed it, if I plugged points in, so if I plugged 1 in, 1 squared minus 1 is 0, so that's 1, 0. And same with -1. And so if I graph these, it would go like this. And where does it cross the x-axis? Right there. So my solutions are -1 and +1. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll just write it like this: plus or minus 1. So that's one that has 2 solutions. If I graph this, x squared is the parent function. Remember that. Just starts right there at 0, 0 and goes up. Looks something like this.
Will the following students please come to administration?
And so the solution where it crosses the x-axis is right there at 0, 0. So the only solution is 0. So this, there's 2 solutions. Here there's only 1 solution. And if you guess what's coming up right here, if we graph this, it would start up here in the parent function, it would go up. And so where does this parabola cross the x-axis? And the answer is nowhere. So there are no solutions. Okay, so that's the difference. You can either have two of them, you can have one of them, or you can have none of them. So graphing, that's one way. Oops. Let me go back one. The other way is using square roots. So square roots is we basically solve the equation for x. Now, really the only way that we can do that is when it's in the form, and get this in your notes, when it's in the form of x squared equals some number k, where k is some number. Now, this one isn't in that form yet, but we can get it there. So what we do is we take 3x squared minus 75 equals 0. And can we get it in this form where x, we have a 1x squared? Add 75 to both sides. So we have 3x squared equals 75. Divide by 3. And now we have x squared equals 25. So now it's in this form. It's a 1x squared equals some number. And to figure that out, you take the square root. And the square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 25 is both plus and minus 5. We have to keep that in mind. A lot of times we just say the square root of 25 is 5. But technically, it's also negative 5. Because if you took negative 5 squared, you would get 25. Okay? So let's try one more. Let's get this in the form, the correct form. Sorry about that. So let's get this in the correct form. So to do that, we have to add, maybe this is going to work. Okay, I'm having some technical difficulties right now, but if you were to try these out, this answer would be m, so you would add 36 to both sides, you take the square root, and the solutions would be plus or minus 6. Okay, this one would not have a solution, because when you subtract 15 and then divide by 3, you get negative 5, and you can't take the square root of negative 5. And this one, when you subtract 16, you get 0. When you divide by 4, you get 0, and the square root of 0 is just 0, so there's only one solution here. All right, and that is chapter 9.3.